So right now we're just missing the role.
Good evening, everyone.
I'm just trying to check this again.
Good evening, everyone. For some reason, my internet connection is kind of bad, but I want to talk to everyone about the exam coming up. Can everyone hear me? All right.
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that again. I'm going to soon turn over the host to Ms. Renee Tucker, but I just want to talk about the exam. We have it scheduled for next week, Saturday. If that's okay, please let me know.
And the time?
Time 9 a.m. to 12 noon at the Institute or in Freeport at our location in Freeport.
Where is your location in Freeport?
Okay. We have our COB liaison, Dr. Carly Kelly. She has classrooms at Jeremy's Auto. It's close to the airport. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. And the exam starts at 9?
Yes, 9 a.m. to 12 noon.
Okay.
Okay, so it's about 10 days away. If that date is okay, please let me know. If not, we can push it to the other Saturday.
That would be the Saturday for the holiday. We have a holiday this.
You have a holiday on
the Labor Day
holiday
would
weekend.
be that Friday. So, yeah. So that will be like June around June 5th or something, 5th or 4th or something.
The 29th, May 29th is okay for me.
That'll be June 5th, but if not, the 29th of May.
Yeah, the 29th is okay with me.
Okay, great. So I will go ahead and schedule it for 9 a.m. So you will be able to go to the Freeport location to take your exam, and then she'll send over your exam to us.
So that's pretty much it.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and give the controls over to Ms. Tucker. And I wish you all on your best in your exam and assignments. And you will receive you won't receive your certificates. We'll give you a letter of completion once you get your grades, but you'll receive your certificates at our award ceremony, hopefully scheduled for October, pending on the emergency orders and our
how you behave yourself.
Yes. So
once we get out of this crisis right now,
then you'll walk down the aisle, with your coat down, and get your your certificate. Okay, so October you'll get your certificate, but once you pass, you'll get a letter stating that you've completed the course and you've been successful. So October is your award ceremony. Keep that in mind. We will need a photograph from you. We do a booklet, and we do ads and so forth. So if anything, just email me or Ms. Tucker, and we'll go ahead and answer any questions. Okay?
Okay, no problem. Any comments? Any additional questions for Mr. Pratt?
No, Mom, I'm good.
So we're all set then to do the exam next week, Saturday?
Yes, and those who are in Nassau, you will go to our office. And are you familiar with where our office is at? We're on Elizabeth Avenue and Shirley Street.
So that would be Brooke, and that would be Miss Moss, No, sorry, that would be Blair. Brooke is in Freeport and Roll is in Freeport. So both of them will be contacting your UB representative.
Correct. Yes, I will send the information to my UB representative, and then they will go ahead and facilitate the exam.
Okay, so we would only have, that would be Miss Moss and Blair to come in to the office on Elizabeth Avenue.
Correct. May 29th at 9 a.m.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Ms. Tucker, question.
Sorry.
If you don't mind, I see a choice of 2 essay questions, but how many you're going to give us to
Choose from?
Yes.
Yeah, it would be more like probably you'd maybe have like 6 or 4.
And we just
and you just pick 2.
Okay.
And basically they would just revolve around the core concepts that we talked about.
Okay.
So you could look at things like you can probably write on what is records management, because you know there are different components. We did trial, you know, so there are certain things that you would be looking for. You'd have to define what it is. You can tell about some of the related disciplines. You can talk about what is a record. You can talk about the benefits of records management. So records management in itself could be a topic. You know, there could also be something in terms of an inventory. You know, what is an inventory? What is a records inventory? Why is it an important part of records management? You know, you make it also talk about disposition, you know, because each of those activities in itself has a few components that we would have talked about. Even there's a heavy one like the generally accepted record keeping principles. That in itself could be an essay. You know, there's enough components to generate an essay for that particular topic. So it wouldn't be so much going in depth to say, well, measuring whatever. It's just the like I say, the essentials involved in various aspects of a records management program.
Okay. And the multiple choices about how many?
Multiple choice, right.
How many,
multiple choice, like I say, it would be pretty much based on what we've shared and what we've learned. So some of them may ask a kind of a particular question, and then you choose one of the options.
Right.
You know?
I just know you'll have like what, 50, 100, like that. Just an average.
They allow like 3 hours. So
right, that is a 3-hour exam.
So. If it's even that at the most, I don't know. I'm not sure this time we're gonna go all the way to 100, depending on, like I say, I'll just make sure I have enough questions related to, like I say, the core components.
Correct. You know, okay.
A fundamental course. So you want to know what it is, okay, and you want to know what is required to be done in this discipline. You know, so as you advance, then you can pay greater attention to maybe how do you develop a retention schedule. But at this stage, you just have to know what it is.
Right.
You get my point?
Yes,
yeah. Right. Because there's more involved in trying to design the different things that may come about, how to do a file plan, etc. So you just want to understand that these are some of the things involved in it. Maybe a high level of a process, but nothing drilling right down to in-depth 1-step, 2-step, 3-step itemized details for designing and developing components.
Ms. Tucker, you guys sent more documents because I didn't get anything.
You didn't get the last chapter, but the systems.
You
What's
said
the
it
last
last
chapter?
week. I didn't
The
get it.
last chapter was to do with the digital, chapter 8, the
Oh,
digital,
okay, I have that.
right.
Is that
Uh,
stuff last week?
yeah, I didn't
Oh,
send anything else. The one that I'm
okay.
gonna send, I think Mr. Roll mentioned that he found the graphics helpful, that had like good pictures of the cycle and stuff like that. So a lot of material that I'm going to send, it's just for reference purposes to help you. I found another excellent sample of a policy that was pretty well laid out. So for persons like Ms. Moss, who's actively engaged in really developing for her company, I want to try and give you like a lot of samples that you can look at and be able to develop to suit your organization.
Okay, so you'll send that out.
Right. That's what I'd be sending out. So, like I said, most of the material, the summary sections, they're the good places to make sure you understand that. And you can reach out to me if you're going through a particular summary area and there's still something that you're not sure of, but like I said, we're focusing on the frameworks with the majority of these. So it's not that I'm going to ask you to, in that time frame, write a file plan or develop a retention schedule. I just need you to know if you're writing about records management and you may be asked what all you would have to do, that you would know to mention that in order to get started, you have to conduct an inventory because you have to know what records exist. Okay, after you've conducted an inventory, you then use that information to develop your file plan and your retention schedule. And after that, you want to be able to monitor and report on what is happening. So that type of framework around records management is what we need to know. And you need to be familiar with, like I say, the records management tools, which are what we're talking about now. So tonight would be basically talking about the digital documents. Okay, and we also wanted, we did mention that you have assistance with electronic record keeping systems. And so basically with those, it's just to understand how they can help you. Okay, so I did go through your life cycle documents, and I must say you guys do a lot of research, so that's a good thing. So it's just sometimes you want to be able to read it and make sure it's not just everything as the book says, but you kind of grasp the overall key nugget in what they're saying. Okay, so with the life cycle management exercise, you wanted to talk about the fact that you have to create documents. And the life cycle management, like we say, because we're operating in most instances in a hybrid mode, because we have paper and we have electronic. So when we create or receive, we're also looking at the fact that it may be in paper or it may be electronic. Okay, once it's created or received, basically it has to be stored so that it can be used, and then later we archive what is of value, and then we destroy. So in a nutshell, that's like the cycle. Some diagrams may go more into use and distribution. In terms of the active phase. So some people broke it out as well to look at what's the active phase and what's the inactive phase. And the active phase is primarily when the document has just been created and there's a request for that information. So it has to then go to the persons that need it. Okay, when we talk about actually storing Then we have to put in other parameters, because when we store, we have to make sure we store it securely. We also have to make sure it's stored so that persons with access are able to access the information. And if you don't have access, you should not be able to um, at least you should not be able to view or interact with it. Okay, and the archive part of it, we have that component whereby it may have a different meaning for IT, but as a records management person, your primary concern, as opposed to archiving for IT, primarily relating to just storing it offline or something like that, a records person is concerned that information of value, when it's archived, it's been done in such a way that it's being preserved. So records managers and archivists really equate that part of it with preservation. Okay, and eventually destruction. And destruction has the various components in that it's been tagged for a specific period of time of when that record will be useful. And at the end of that time, there should be a process that kicks off whereby that information is tagged. Notifications are sent to the owners of the information indicating that it's up for destruction, and then they should be able to eventually have that information destroyed. And when we say destroyed, that means destroyed. So there should be no pieces, no remains, nowhere else. The record should be destroyed. Your only link or audit trail should be maybe a little blurb, a little data entry or something indicating the document, the key information to say that this particular record has been destroyed, you know. And the reason for that being, you know, if you have a records management program and you want to be able to defend your disposition of the records, you can't do it in such an ad hoc way that should anything happen, some information you destroyed and some information you did not. And in a legal environment, that wouldn't be looked at very kindly. So from the onset, once you implement something for disposition, you should be able to show consistency with that. So in terms of the homework, like I said, this is the one that I'm grading, the life cycle management. This is the one I'm going to try and send out to you by Friday, by tomorrow. I just have to review the scores and put the grade together. So I'll send it back. Any questions with regard to the first one that was sent out, the first assignment? Anything that wasn't clear, or maybe felt there was some ambiguity or anything? Everyone pretty much clear on what is records management and the components of the program? Like I said in most of my comments, once you define it, okay, what it is, and you know, I'm not gonna stick to have you to say memorize one specific definition, but within your definition, you should include the fact that it deals with the management of records in any format, okay, and the fact that it's systematic. Okay, so basically the core components that show that it's not ad hoc and it applies to all records, whether they're paper or electronic. Okay, and so then you should define, you know, say what is a record. And then you should talk about the fact that records, because records provide that evidence of business activities, etc. There are principles that govern them. And then you could talk about the generally accepted record keeping principles. Okay, and then remember now there's also those 5 important components, program components. And there, that's a whole records management essay. Okay, you know, even to the point of in your intro, like you don't have to spend too much. So intro and conclusion could focus on the fact that it's come out of some other disciplines, and I think the book mentioned them. So that's important to know. It's evolved out. It is a professional discipline, you know. And at the time prior to that, persons may not have felt it was because their idea of it related only to filing. Okay, but as we can see, there are many components involved in being able to successfully manage corporate information. And then there's something that's also a good nugget to put in the fact that there's a difference between information sources from a library versus records management in an organization. Anyone can tell me what that difference is? It was mentioned in our earlier discussions. And that's what really separates, although records management evolved out of principles from library science, it was more because of the organized way libraries manage their information. Okay, so anyone remember that specific difference with library versus records management? Although you may say, well, oh, in a company, yeah, you have records, they are stored like things in a library, or you look at that to kind of get yourself together. There's a big difference between what information the library provides and the service in the organization as a part of the records unit. Very important distinction. Anyone?
The I don't remember, but I'm thinking that the library doesn't actually hold a record. It's just
Well, it
bunch
is.
of books.
Okay,
I mean,
it's a bunch of books, and that's the clue. Okay,
yeah.
those books are what? Published information. You see?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So with the library, your collection or your holdings relate to published information, whereas the holdings for the companies and corporate, they're non-published. They're a result of the activities of that organization. So they're not out there for persons to just go in and browse until they get to that disposition phase, where maybe if they are of a historical nature or it's from like a public organization, then they would eventually end up in an archives for research, etc. But that primary difference is that your libraries deal with published information, whereas the information within the organization is non-published information. It's proprietary information of the organization.
Okay.
And I would have to deal with confidentiality.
Pardon me?
That would have to deal with confidentiality.
Right. So you have things like that, confidentiality, etc. And you know, even in certain library collections, if it's donated, they can have restrictions on them as well. You know, if it's a closed collection or something like that. But more so with archives. In archives, sometimes you could have people donate stuff to the archives, and they have stipulations on it. You know, and sometimes with information, it's not warranted for release until like years later, sometimes after the living individuals would have died, then that information would be available for release to the public, you know. But things of that nature, I think you're going to see play out a lot more when we um, get established with the Freedom of Information Act. Okay. So anything to clarify with regard to life cycle?
No, for me.
Okay. All right. So basically, when we talk about electronic systems, we're looking at something that's manual or automated, used to collect records, to organize them, to categorize them, to facilitate preservation of them. And basically, we like to be able to utilize them for retrieval of information. Okay, so there are many types of systems out there that assist us in doing various functions. And in particular, our focus is on records management systems. Okay, and so basically, when we look at a record management system, there are a few things that we want to ensure that system is able to do. So we would want to ensure that we can declare a record, okay, capture records. Actually, we're able to maintain and use those records and basically facilitate things like transfer and disposal. Okay, so we are able to create systems to help us manage electronic records and information. You sometimes they may be manual or automated. Okay, and that in terms of organizing, collecting, retrieving, using, preserving, and disposing of those records, that's how come they would come into play. So the system itself in certain institutions, sometimes it's partially managed or maintained by IT in addition to the actual owner of the record. So these are chance and opportunities for collaboration between records management and IT so that you can ensure the most efficient way of managing all the records for your organization despite varying formats. And like I said, the challenge now is we have hybrid environments. We don't have, well, Brooke, you said y'all are totally electronic?
No, no, we're not.
Oh, okay. Somebody here, oh, Blair, everything you do now is electronic?
Yes.
Okay, so you're actually using a system then.
Yes, we are.
And which one is that?
Documentum.
Oh, okay. So that's one in in 1,000 when I say that, because of the proliferation now of so many types of systems. And the thing is, I said records management, right? And so that's a challenge because you have automated systems that are geared, not the records management component is what you look for to actually say a system is um, functional for that purpose. However, you have systems, they may say, oh yes, we do record management. But when you look at it, it may be a document management system because they're basically concerned with once you create, they're concerned with tracking. So that's more on a level to deal with workflow. Because once that is created, they want to make sure as that document routes through the system, they're able to see who has it, who's working on it, who has made changes, etc. So at the end of the day, they may not function so well when it comes to applying retention, and so retention or the disposition phase is very critical when you're looking at a system to do records management features. Okay, and once you have a records management system, what that actually does is at the point where that the whole process on that record is completed, that record is then transferred into that particular records management repository, and it's not to be altered or changed. So if you have a system that is still changing and altering the document, that's and there's no provision to basically at the completion of that particular transaction or what have you, when that actually serves as a corporate record, cannot keep that and make sure those 8 core principles can be demonstrated, then that may not be a records management system, you know. So the fact that it can declare and all of this relate to a lot of metadata that goes around that record. So who created the record, when it was created, format it was created in, okay? All of those things apply. Keeping electronic records without related metadata is useless, okay? So a part of looking at and assessing systems would also entail what are they able to capture, because from a records management perspective, certain metadata is critical and vital to ensuring the integrity of that record. Okay, so when they capture records, these systems should be able to allow for the import of the record from other sources. So they should be able to create a link from that record keeping system to the record. And usually that is in whatever is this native system. Okay, so that you can have, you need to be able to have the functionality to capture from other sources and then be able to import them into that system, so that you can have like an audit trail on that record. And it's also important because it's a record, it's an evidence of business transaction for that firm or that company. And so it has to be what? Backed up. You have to have copies, and that is your just in case. Okay, so and that just in case could be man-made or something that's what we call a natural disaster. Okay, and so if you don't have appropriate backups and there's something, you know, technology fails us sometimes. So what happens if you have an issue and the tape or whatever gets damaged? You know, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna now access that record without a backup? Okay, because the record has to be read accurately, and you want it to be able to be interpreted throughout the life, the useful life of that record. You know, so that also brings up the point with systems. And when you have systems that eventually they're no longer serviced, okay, they're what we call the legacy systems. They've been around for a long time and you're still using them. Okay, but now you're getting ready to upgrade and make changes. Okay, so you need to be able to ensure, if you're looking at moving on to another environment, another platform, etc., these records are protected and still can be transferred without any damage into your new system. So electronic records management systems will require that you maintain appropriate backup copies of records, okay, and provide recovery procedures for any records stored in the various systems. And that's like speaking to your disaster or emergency plan. Some people call it business continuity, some people call it disaster recovery, and pretty much we have seen what happens because of the fact that we have been impacted for several years now in terms of natural disasters, hurricanes, bad hurricanes, and now the COVID pandemic. So it forces us to have to engage in another way. And to engage in another way, we need to have access to the information to do those things that we are required to do. So having said that, we need to maintain the integrity and the security of records that are both electronic or printed. Okay, and we need to be able to accurately read and interpret them throughout the whole time that they're required. So you don't just want once you get the information in, it's created, you serve that client, okay, and that goes to store, okay, and certain things are long term. If you're dealing with transactions that involve land or property sales or shares, certain things aren't really transactions that occur quite frequently or rapidly, as opposed to maybe persons, consumer buying or spending things. Okay, so certain transactions, it may be something where it's something happens now, but it's not until years into the future there's a need to transact on that again. So when we think about engaging a type of system, that is something we want to look at. We want to look at long-term future use, and so that may mean some costs in terms of having to now migrate your information systematically within a certain period of time to ensure, or finding digital preservation software for those long-term records. So the whole
Ms. Tucker, you
muted
muted.
yourself, Ms. Tucker.
Sorry. Okay. So based on your various stages, which goes back to the life cycle concept that we have to really understand, that also entails what you look at in a particular system, So there's a whole process involved in making sure that the system you select, you don't do it in a vacuum, okay? And you have users. When you're looking at a system, you don't want a system that's so complex, nobody uses it, because that could easily be your $1 million down the drain. So there's a lot of engagement involved when we talk about selecting systems, electronic systems for our organizations. Okay, so the records captured mean that we need to be able to retrieve them. We need to be able to access them to do our work. And also, in doing our work, it may involve having to share information. Okay, so how do you share information at this current time in your organizations? Especially if you're in two modes, your paper and electronic. And you know that sharing also creates a risk. That means you have a lot of copies that could end up floating around at the end of the day. And if you don't have a concise framework on identifying the original, that could cause problems as well. What we call the duplicate nightmare. So in your organizations, if you're in an electronic realm and you're not allowing printing, how are you doing your sharing of information? Is it that you're putting it on a shared drive so that persons would access if you're in a group. Anyone in here use SharePoint?
Yes, but only certain people have access to that
Okay.
particular platform. So.
Okay. All right.
We are not as sophisticated as yet.
Oh. Okay. You know, but there are various tools, and like I say, you really have, before you invest in them, you have to do some legwork, you know, get familiar with demos, speak with the vendors. Don't allow, because one thing with vendors, everyone always have a product that does exactly what you want until you get it. And you want to watch out for too much customizations, you know, because that could be a headache as well, you know. So when you have to do so much customizations, that runs you into additional funds, you know. So one thing I can say is that you usually don't get a system that's 100% what you want it to do, but you can do the cost benefits and you can weigh it. So if this system is able to do 80% of the things you wanted to do, and there's just that minor 20% you may have to do a little tweaking on, that may be much better than trying still, and you find that after 5 6 years you're still searching for a product. It doesn't work like that, you know. So take the effort up front to define what you want, you know, before you actually go out and sign off on something that at the end of the day, you know, causes more work than you anticipated. So we have products out there. We have stuff like Blair said they're using um, Documenter. Okay, but there's you have vendors like an Iron Mountain or like a Sunrise here that actually have their own software product, and you can actually pay to have them host your information. And then again, that comes in with your policies and your environment and security concerns that you may have. So they can actually, rather than you having to take it on in-house, they can come and provide that service for you, so that you're basically only logging into their system and accessing your information, but they're maintaining it. Anything to do with capturing it, storing it, um, making for making provisions for you to use whatever software they have for retrieval and access. You know, so the thing is that these are services, and so there's a cost, and based on what your budget is would determine what service or services you're able to access or utilize from a vendor. Okay, so open text, there's something called Zazio. There's um, there's another one. Oh, Zazio is a records management software that primarily is used for financial institutions as well. So when these types of applications basically would allow you to manage your life cycle, your records life cycle. And you would be able to, at various stages, okay, once you would have your framework set up with your liaisons and who it would be dealing with. So you would then be able to, from you scan in to the repository, you would be able to apply the metadata you need, and then you would just basically monitor it from there and report. So you would be able to generate reports based on usage. You'd be able to generate reports based on the number of records up for disposition. You'd be able to generate reports of relating to maybe non-compliance in the fact that persons would have been sent notifications on records up for disposition, okay, and they haven't signed off on it, you know, or in creating a document, certain metadata fields would be needed, and if they aren't applied, could impact how you actually are able to track and monitor that record. Okay. So based on anything that we would have read in chapter 8, were there any primary areas of concern or things that you would have liked to have more clarity on? Okay, because in that chapter, it talked about the email archiving software. It also talked about I think there's, there's also a standard for use of systems. And in the US, their government agencies have to ensure that those systems meet something called a DoD 5015 standard. And that's something that was developed by the US Department of Defense for any electronic record keeping software that's being used for their government business. So basically, there are certain criteria that have to be met in order for that institution to agree to use that software within their organization. So like I might have indicated earlier, there, in terms of the compliance, the regulations, etc., locally with regard to records management, I would say it's more or less evolving, because a lot of the aspirations and national goals we all want to achieve as a nation depends on documentation, depends on being transparent. And a lot of these things relate back to information. And if we're not doing a good job at it, it then speaks to the fact that we may not see the desired results in these goals and lofty aspirations we have. So given the fact that I think it's more of a behind the scenes discipline with rippling effects when it's not carried out effectively, as we get more push to become, I guess, better at some of these core issues that relate to transparency and accountability, there'll be more, I think, more frameworks developed nationally to ensure that it happens, because like I said, right now, the Freedom of Information Act has been in the making for a while. It was passed, then it had to go through some changes again. And so although it's in the phase where we're getting incremental steps towards it down the road, it will happen. And so at this time, for persons who have decided to zone in on effective management of information, have decided to embrace the fact that we need to now move into the digital realm to do a better job, it will come to the point where we can have probably more national legislation, etc., around the fact that information and records are crucial to developing our policies and procedures. And like I said, we will then, I guess, have better results and more support for this area. So with digital documents, it talked about the fact that we have inactive and active records that we have to store and keep on hand. Procedures are required. Okay, we have to be able to delineate our responsibilities. Okay, we also talked about the fact that our equipment and our supplies have to be compatible with what we're working with. So if we're moving away from paper, you won't be primarily concerned with ordering additional file cabinets. You won't be primarily concerned with having to utilize a records center, because then your records now are going to be housed electronically. So your equipment needs will then change. You will then be more concerned with your networks, your computer systems, etc. Nowadays, I think we mentioned micrographics, and that's not a very popular thing right now. And with micrographics, that's still analog because, like I said, you're still looking at the actual image on the film or the tape that can be magnified and you'd be able to see it, as opposed to in the digital realm, it's just bits and bytes. Okay, so documents are routinely created through use of the software that we talked about before, the word processing software. You have email messages that are used, and I mentioned before that although we say we look at email, and there's a whole section in the back that talked with regard to email messages. Certain things have evolved with use of email based on the practices that are in place. So one of the things we would have talked about is the fact that if you email something, it's a communication, but there's records attached, because they're telling you something and they're sending you documents as well. Okay, so there's something to do with email management that would grow out of records management, and that would involve being able to manage email. Is one of those nightmares because it spirals. You send it to 10 people and they send it to some other people. So you see the type of a messy web that's encountered in terms of trying to manage and track emails. So individually, we can all do our part by ensuring that once we receive messages in email format, we save the email once it elevates to the status of a record. And when I say that, it's not just an email about lunch or an upcoming conference. It's a message that has details about policies. It may be a message with procedures, or it may be a message that deals with documentation as it relates to minutes or meetings of a board or a committee. So even though it came in the email form, what should you do? You would then need to actually save that in the designated repository for that information, you know. But I'm talking about saving and putting in repositories, etc. But is that a reality for you guys? Have you reached to the level or the point where you have that framework, that structure that tells you, that outlines from you come in? Is there a process when people come into the organization new that you have something laid out for them to understand what records are created by your company and how they are to handle them?
We have like an online training.
Mm-hmm.
So what'll happen if a new employee comes in, they'll sit in front of the compliance officer,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a level of training in there, and then there's some online training modules that they have to go through, tells them about the bank, what font they want on their letterheads, organization of the letters, the history of the organization.
So you do that, that's your orientation training for all new persons?
Right, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so something is in there that speaks specifically to the fact that of how the organization expects them to work with the records?
That is up to the client documentation department. That's a separate training.
The which department?
Client documentation.
Mm-hmm. So do you have a area that actually is designated to deal with records management, or is that just like a part of duties of IT or something like that?
No, the client documentation department will deal with it. And if we need to tell IT to customize something in the system, that's the only way IT would be really involved. But it's basically us, because I work in that department. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah. So we deal with all the records. But we're going through an exercise now where we're destroying a lot of records.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found was there were 4 separate systems going on, because front office had boxes that they sent up. Our department had boxes, then operations had a set of boxes, and compliance had a set of boxes, but none of them, we couldn't find one list where we could identify exactly what was in those boxes, when they were sent, by whom, that kind of scenario. So we kind of scrambling to find out.
So that's the thing, because what I wanted to say was that's a part of the disposition process. So every unit, when they're to the point where they're removing records from the office, that should involve that transmittal list. So it should go to, you should have a copy, and then within the box, there should be a copy of what's been placed in that box.
Yeah. I don't think anyone paid attention back then. They would just like get it out of the office.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going through the inventory stage, which is kind of late in the game because we're destroying them. But I was kind of stressing how we need to know exactly what we're destroying.
Right.
And
that's where you create you have a set form to indicate, because that's, once they're destroyed, that's the only record you need, that document destruction certificate.
Right.
You file that to say these were destroyed by whatever unit, and you would have your necessary signatures to sign off, which would be management, the person preparing, and basically 2 other signatures, one from the person responsible for disposition, and also if you have somebody in another area destroying them, because some firms have their own shredding machines, so usually that would be like somebody from facilities.
Right. So I have a question. Who is supposed to hold the master list of what is at?
If you're the unit that's responsible for carrying out that process, then you're supposed to have that list.
So it doesn't fall. So specific, if it's not specifically related, but for instance, if it's just a general record that people want, it's not client related. I think that's the problem, the disconnect that we were having with everybody else. If it wasn't specifically client related, we just chose, well, I can't say we, but whoever the powers would be were at the time just chose not to deal with whatever else was going up there. So I wanted to know if that is something that our department should take on to kind of centralize the process. Or
someone has to own it. Someone has to own it because, you know, although I found in the past a lot of places, the records management officer, records management unit, those terms did not exist. And coming from a background where I worked in the public sector, you basically had like titles like clerks, etc. But the British, who would have been as colonies, they had a rigid system set up. So the term in the government section that I learned was registries. So the areas that kept records were considered registries. So the registry it was pretty much outlined, and I've been out of that government sector for a number of years now. But however, the only thing that would have needed to be done was to update the information, because the terminologies and the type of formats that they were referring to would have been when you had typewriters and you had to type out documents, and you also had to remember they had something they used to you used to do duplications on. It was kind of messy. You had to you would type into this carbon, and then you had to put it on the machine.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the machine, but yeah, to get duplicate copies, you had to go through that process. So a lot of the documentation that was in place on how to do these different things would have been in this compiled document for managing the government information. However, if at this point in time, nobody took on that and updated it, then, you know, people pretty much creating their own way of doing things. Persons who would have been there back then, they would have left. And if the training wasn't transferred, you know, people just went ad hoc and developed stuff, which is not good for being able to ensure continuity of the information. But you have to have it, and like that's why we talk about the program components and the fact that you need that sponsor so that somebody is identified, or it's going to keep sliding away, and not until it causes what we say damage to the institution, then, you know, somebody. But with all the talk about fraud and corruption, etc., that drives in the need to make sure that you know, these things are put in place, and one of which is some type of a program to manage corporate information. Somebody has to own it.
Okay.
So document indexing and retrieval, that's one of the strong points with when you talk about electronic systems, you know, because like I said, it was alluding to earlier, you cannot, whereas with a micrographic image, there are ways to magnify it and you can actually read what's on the media. You can't do that in the digital environment. And the whole purpose is that you want to be able to access it afterwards. And if it's not indexed properly, you could imagine in the electronic environment, you can hold and store so much more. And to not, when you're talking about thousands of documents on a disk space, millions of documents, and having to find that, although people say, oh, just do a simple search, what happens when you come up with 1,000,000 hits? That isn't efficient to try to be guessing through that. So that's why your document indexing and retrieval features have to be strong and powerful and supported with something like a structured plan that you convey to your users and get buy-in and feedback. And the thing about it is, you, like I say, it has to be kept simple so that you get people to use it. So back in the day, sometimes it was felt that for security reasons, you had to go so complex, but there are other ways of controlling security. For use, the simplicity is the best thing, because you want it to be done routinely. And if people are finding that it's difficult to capture the information and store it and then eventually retrieve it, they're going to develop their own systems, which would then put you in a lot of problems, because that means that when you think you have all the information, you don't, because some is tucked away on somebody else's drive or someone else's little device. I mean, you know, what you plug in, the USB, the sticks or what have you. Okay, so you want features like the indexing and retrieval. That's big. So there's a lot of information in there in that chapter regarding the different parameters and the values for the index. Okay, and the fact that full text is one of the popular features when we talk about being able to search. People want to be able to search on everything, and so you would find that's also a drawback, because it'll take longer and also increase your volume of hits. Okay, so you have the automatic categorization of things. Also, in terms of functionality, okay, you want to be able to have stuff well organized to alleviate some of the issues that can come about from having to search and the use of what I call it, multiple styles, so to speak. If it's ungoverned and there's no organizational standard, like I say, an enterprise plan on how information will be filed, how information will be searched for, you run into problems. Okay, and sometimes with some systems you will find they are case sensitive. So if Moss is typing her subject headings with caps only at the beginning, and we have Roll typing his subjects all caps in a system that's case sensitive, you're gonna have an issue, because the information that Roll puts in, when Moss searches for it, and she searches it the way she would have entered her information, which is the standard caps only at the beginning of the words, then she will only find what she puts into the system, you know, and so it can result in frustration. You know, persons will, you want to be able to ensure these systems are helping people to do the job they need to do, and they expect that it's more efficient than the way they would have been doing it. So they're only going to trust you as the person guiding them if they find that the system is user friendly and they can see the benefits that were explained to them. But if they get a system and it's, when they go to search for information, not found, They try to put it in this way, they look for that, you know, and all of that stems back to how are we ensuring that persons are trained on the system initially, you know. So while the electronic systems provide that degree of functionality and ease and benefits, because if it's the right system, yes, you will find things easier. Yes, you will be able to organize. Yes, you will be able to get the prompts and notifications to instruct you to do those routine tasks that result from having to be compliant with legislations, etc. So for digital documents, there are criterias in how we create them. We want to make sure, just like you remember when you, well, we still have people here who file, who have papers. So basically, from what I recall back in the day, you had to, when you got something to file, you had to check to see whether that had that initial or sign off to say that was ready to file. So there had to be certain signature in place if that was referring to a particular letter. When you filed it, you had to make sure that there was some cross-reference in relation to that physical correspondence so that the person looking at that letter know what page in the file to go to find the previous correspondence. And so, like I say, a new platform, but still the same process. So electronically, when you're talking about engaging a system, these are things you would want to know you can still do within the electronic realm. So when you capture the document and you store it, okay, and something else comes in, okay, how are you now able to link and guide the person who has to deal with that, how to find that information? And so that's where you have the types of systems, and basically you don't want to have to be buying tons of system for every different function. So that's why the initial review of the product is so important, you know, because you have what they call ECM, and that's electronic content management system. And that's different from a document management system in that electronic content management system not only store files of like Word files, they store all types of files. So you can have documents, you can have images, you can have audio. All of these, as a part of a process, are captured into this one repository. And you're able to then link them based on your structured plan, your structured file plan. You're able to link them based on who should have access to them, etc. You know, so an ECM system, which is content management system, a document management system, a records management system, are all types of systems that can be engaged to process information electronically. So in terms of the types, I have a document, I have a presentation I remembered I went to, and it focused on all these various types of systems that are out there and gave some good pointers with regard to if you have to choose a system. So in addition to a sample records management policy, etc., these documents I'm sending for your reference purposes, not so much to engage as additional material for the test. Like I said, the test is going to focus primarily on the core concepts for records management. What is records management? And those made the primary tools. Your retention schedule, your file plan, okay, the program, the life cycle. So just to make clear that, you know, it is a whole lot of material that that's involved with the discipline, but it's just, I'd even provide some links. Like I said, I remember, Brooke, you went to the webinar, one of the webinars where anyone else was able to look
Yeah.
at any of the other sites?
Webinar was me.
The
I did.
webinar was Blair.
Right.
Anybody else was able to look at any of the external links that were there? Even if you visited two of the two associations website, that's ARMA and AIM.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so Miss Moss, you visited.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's great. And like I said, it's hopeful that if there's an interest in certifying further, you know, you can reach out and I will try and make sure get the link or whatever so you can read up some more on current available certifications in the field. But it's not too late, so you can still go, and like I said, the Records Management University site, all of their webinars that they would have done covering basic records management, they would have them on that site as well. I think it went back as far as 3 years. So you can find something if you're not clear or you need more clarification around life cycle or maybe digital documents, which is really popular at this time. You can actually listen in on, and their webinars usually, I think the maximum is an hour if it goes to that. Sometimes they're shorter. The Association of Intelligent Information Management, which is AIM, they usually have webinars as well. And these are all free. You don't have to pay for them. So what I'll do as well, if there are, I think maybe one or two, but they may know our exam is next week. So just for future reference, if you'd like to have information on any upcoming ones, I can always email you a link on any upcoming webinars that are sent to me. And if you would like to probably listen in on one or two of them, I can always forward you that link. But like I say, it's all a means of providing access to resources that are out there, especially if you're having to build a program from scratch. Because pretty much things are not pretty ordered under that particular area. So you may find some records management responsibility with IT. You may find some, if you have a compliance area, they may be doing a little bit of it. And even sometimes with legal. And even the placement of records management varies in certain institutions. Okay. Some institutions may have it, as in our institution, we've been combined with library. So we're called the Information Assets Management Unit. Whereas before there was a unit under the IT team. In some institutions, they put records management directly with legal. Or it can also be, I've seen even cases where it was under HR, you know. So, and I guess because they were emphasizing the strong need for awareness and employee training. So the records management program was put under the HR department. And sometimes when we look at corporate risk, that's what is the biggest draw with the information. The risk around information getting into the wrong hands because it's not published information, it's proprietary information related to that company, you know, and especially if you're a company where you have trade secrets or copyrights and etc. That information is so valuable, you don't want that in the wrong hands. Okay. So in terms of the points that were mentioned on how the technology simplifies records management, are there any comments about that? It talked about the retrieval. It talked about being able to access it in terms of the distribution. It isn't like it back in the day when you had to make those what they call it? It was a Gestetner machine or something like that. Miss Moss, you remember that?
No, ma'am, not at all.
Yeah, you used to have to type on the stencil. It was like a waxy thing. And when you type the correspondence, you then had to put it on a machine that would ink it, and you would turn it, and then it would shoot out all the copies. Shoot out,
Wow.
yeah. And so you could put that stencil up and put it back on the machine if you needed additional copies. So it was heavily utilized, like in school environments and in offices where they probably had to produce like multiple copies, and you didn't really have the modern copier available at that time. So we've come a long way with regard to how information is processed. So in terms of the other components, we talked about benefits. So these, make sure you're aware of those. Everyone know what I'm looking at? The part of the text that spoke to try any page 210, I think. Yeah, they gave us about 8 pointers with regard to what I would call the advantages of the electronic systems. Y'all follow me? You know where I am with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
210 in chapter 8, right?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they talked about the simplified distribution of it.
This is what our essay is supposed to be on, right? Basically.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm gonna give you enough topics to.
No, I mean the homework. Sorry, ma'am.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Yes. Our last questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So those points, I think there were like 8.
Yeah.
Advantages that they gave with regard to utilizing electronic systems. Okay. So make sure that we keep that in mind. Okay, and the other things just spoke to some of the pointers and tips and features involved with the digital documents. So that's like a FYI, so just for informational purposes. But just make sure you're very clear on those advantages for the digital documents. Okay, and also there's some there are a few they did mention in terms of the electronic systems. So there's software for certain things, particularly the one that we have the most trouble with, the email. Okay, and then there's records management software. Not really looking for you to name any, but just to know that there's specific software for records management versus document management. Okay. Okay, so we know that the document management systems, they are for active use, active reference. Okay, so that would be documents that's more like dealing with workflow and tracking. Okay, because that's what you need during the active phase. People want to be able to retrieve it easily. Okay, and then you have the inactive phase. Okay, and in the inactive phase, that's when the least use is required. Okay, and basically those things that are in the inactive phase, you're basically storing them just to ensure that whatever the stated retention time is, they're kept for that period of time. And anything that's deemed a record, once it's stored in that system, there shouldn't be any way for it to be tampered with. It should not be edited. It should not be deleted. And there should be no replacement of anything. It's a record, and that record integrity is what prevails. So, and that prevails up until the end of the lifetime of that record. Okay. And so you should be able to define the digital document, right? Everyone clear with that? Anyone can tell me what the digital document is? That's the homework you turned in.
So true. A digital document is a computer processable record, like word processing files, emails, spreadsheets, stuff like that.
Okay. Anyone have anything to add? Remember now, when we talk about a digital document, you could distinguish, because a digital document can be what? Born digital or what? Converted.
That's
You
true.
could have paper that you converted to digital, or it could be born digital. And when we talk about born digital, what does that mean?
That it was created on the computer. For instance, you type up a Word document.
Very good, very good. So that document came from a digital environment. It didn't come from paper into the digital environment. So anything that you create from your computer, store into your various repositories or personal drives, etc., that never manifest into the paper realm, they're your digitally born documents. Okay, so even when you have databases and systems, you have the data in there that basically form the record. Okay, and there was never that format change over. So that's a phrase to know. That's your digitally born documents. Okay, so we got a good example from Brooke in terms of word processing files. Okay, you anybody like to do the drawings on the computer? So you know persons who can some we have a lot of persons now who getting into computer art, etc. So those things were never in the physical realm. Anything that was never in the physical realm, created on your computer, stored, whatever, transferred. You worked with it through a workflow process, digitally born documents. Okay, so we also talked about the arrangements. Okay, so in a physical world, we would have our physical card indexes that we would go to and create our files and store them in the cabinets. So anyone care to describe how we do that now in the digital environment? Once you create that Word document, Brooke, what else do you do?
You would save it um to your computer. You
So
can,
how do you save it? How do you save it? Do you save it to your personal drive? Do you save it? Where do you save it actually?
yeah, you can save it to your personal drive. You can save it to a public
But if
drive.
it's a record, your company would have to establish some protocols with regard to when you process that invoice that goes into your your finance folder on your network drive
Yeah,
or
so it's in, you can save it into the public drive.
mm-hmm,
Um, yeah, like you said, on the folder or files that it would pertain to. For instance, we have the finance. If we were to fill out, say, I can't remember what it's called now, but let's use the PO.
mm-hmm,
Then we would save it in the, you could save that in the finance drive so that they could have access to it. That is in the public drive that all the departments in the company have access to.
okay,
Um, for more sensitive documents, is password accessible. So you
right,
need a password to be able to access.
that actual file.
Mhm.
Mm. Before you get into that, do you know in creating electronic documents you can also put security around those documents
I learned that through reading the
so that once it's
researching
sent out
about it.
nobody could open it and alter it
Mhm.
and that type of thing?
Yeah, well, we have um for the programs that we would use.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for instance, when we open up a customer's um, their their account on the program that we use,
Mm-hmm.
um, certain people have access to change personal information such as their address or
Okay.
their telephone number if they if we needed to update it, but not everybody has access to that. So IT or finance
Mm-hmm.
have the authority to assign people certain access to be able to
Right.
do things like that. So I think that's kind of like what you're talking about.
Right. So that's like the parameters, and that's why with a program you would then have in place the how it is that you will do each of these various processes to enable the security features you need, etc. So you can't, that's why I say it won't work in a vacuum, even in terms of selecting the system, because there are user needs that you have to take into account, and then working in collaboration with other areas that impact records management, like the IT, like the security, like compliance, basically you would be able to finalize something that incorporates all those components, the security component, compliance with whatever regulation or legislation impacts your business. Okay, you're making sure that audit is able to come in and see what you're doing, and that it's, you know, transparent. The necessary controls are in place. So what about the document management system? Document management, that's what you have, Blair.
Yes, we have. What was your question? Sorry about that.
I was just asking, okay, what, remember, there was some information with regard to the document management system and what what it's about. So they did give us a bit of details around the document management system. And remember, I talked about records management system. Okay, so in terms of defining, and then you have email archiving. So they were like the ones that were mentioned in the chapter.
Okay.
So
From
the
oh,
document
sorry.
management system, we said the priority with that is workflow and tracking and monitoring, because you're working with active records with the document management system, as opposed to with a records management system. A record means complete, so you can't make any more changes. You can't alter anything else. It's stored so that it can be probably retrieved for other informational purposes and access. But if you go and do anything to that record, bear in mind, you would have to save what say so, even like versions. Okay, so it's a record up until this point. If it has to be changed, then you're creating a new record. So I was just basically trying to um, follow up with regard to document management system, some of the points they would have mentioned. Because based on business needs, you know, that's what we're gonna pick your system at. And so it just brings me to the point of saying, in some businesses, you don't need a $1 million system, right? There's certain things you can so when you look at systems, you're looking at something that addresses that critical business need in the most cost effective way, you know. So if you don't need something that can do reporting, daily reporting or what have you, then that when you do your checklist on the items you want in that system, you would be able to balance that against what it's going to cost or what is your best option, as opposed to just getting it because they say the system is capable of doing all these things. But yes, bearing in mind you have future aspirations, you know, but still it's all it's all relative. So you don't, you just want to focus on what you need to make sure that your business can function more efficiently without really burdening yourself with a lot of additionals that you may never use.
Okay, so I have a question. the records management systems and the document management systems, that could be found in one software. Why I ask is that the document management system is basically for active electronic information, and the records is basically for like inactive in a way, because these are things you want to keep.
The record management system, like I say, what drives that is that same life cycle.
Right.
Okay. And so with the document management system, you're doing something similar, but it's just basically to follow the process. Like you get a client application in. It has to have five documents attached. They send in the application. It's not complete. So there's that whole process of going back and forth until you get all the documentation you need. It goes on to the next stage of verification and approval. Once that is approved, that particular document now becomes a record. And at that point, that's when you can now declare it. That's what they call declaration, where you can now, because a lot of the systems, they integrate right into like your Word software. So you will just basically maybe have like a button or something that you can now, if you've been working with that in a on a shared drive because of the persons involved in it, once it's completed, rather than just saving it maybe in a folder with completed transactions, you can now take that record and have it sent into the chosen repository for records management. And that record would be locked with the conditions of access, who can go and view it, who can use it, because it's now a record. So you can go and see what the client got, what was approved, etc. Whereas with document management systems, they just end at the completion of that that work process.
Right. Okay.
So for some companies that are heavily engaged with, you know, something like insurance companies that handling claims and stuff like that, a lot of them would be, you can have, sorry, to answer your question, you can have like a document management system. What you would find is the majority of the features relate around just managing and tracking that document. So you would be very limited in what you can get to actually do the records management side of it. You see, so sometimes there's systems in place whereby you utilize document management, and you can have a designated records management solution as well.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know, if it has to be two separate, right? Okay.
Or basically, like if you have Word documents and it's remember I told you about structured and non-structured, okay? And the biggest challenge for records management is the unstructured documents. So it's easy to manage, it's easier to manage documents within a system as opposed to the creation of individual records by multiple users. So you would find in use of unstructured documents, that's where would be an ideal scenario for the records management solution, because at the end of the day, once a person has created that document or that record, they can then file it in the records management application.
Okay.
So there's more control over it. So that they would then declare, and like I say, the features of making it easy is the integration. So it would look like you're using Word, but then you just have a button there for declaration, and it would allow you to then transfer that particular file from where it's at into the official repository. And so users are trained, if they need to retrieve a official copy of the record, they go into the repository. Okay. Okay. So just anyone had any particular questions on vital records? That would have been chapter 6, the one where I think we would have been discussing the fact that it's related to your ability to recover in the event of emergency or a unplanned disruption. Because I don't think we went through this a lot. It was just for you guys to read up on it. Anybody not clear on what is a vital record? Because this is a part of your records management program. It needs to be in place because once you inventory records and you do your necessary interview and questions, you get to find out if the record is vital for that unit or department. And so within your program, you then have to create the necessary protections for that record. Okay. So everyone clear about vital records? They had certain points also with regard to measures, preventative measures for the vital records. Okay, so I guess everybody's comfortable with that. So we did talk about vital records briefly, but there may be one or two questions with regard to vital records because we indicated that these records, they have information that is essential. They are mission critical records, okay? So these are records you cannot get from anywhere else. So I'll just use an example, like your company's maybe articles of incorporation, certain things like that that you need to, if you're a company that is operating from shareholders and you have to have meetings with regard to issues dealing with your ownership, who owns the company, etc. So vital records are not just records that you work with. They are because some of the records you work with, remember, you can get them from other sources. You know, these are records that if you lost them, it would basically shut down your business. And you need to know what they are. So that's why they are part of the program. There has to be something in place to deal and manage vital records. Okay, and that's called protecting the mission critical records. Okay, and you have to survey those so you know what they are and what measures of protection are needed for those records. Okay, and there has to be priority with them as well. Okay, because some records are vital because of the historical components. They tell the history of the company. Okay, so in terms of prioritization, you wouldn't need to recover them right away. Okay, as opposed to vital records that you need to get the business started after an incident. So you would have prioritization within your vital records category. Okay. No more questions about inventorying and making schedules or decisions. Okay. No more questions about imaging technologies. Okay, so pretty much questions from those chapters will be multiple choice. Okay. Your digital documents. No more concerns about that chapter. Everyone did read through it because that would have been what you would have needed to do your last assignment. All right, so I'll try and make sure you get these Friday so you can review them. I would have put a few comments on the paper in relation to what could have made your essay more substantial. So if there are no further questions, everyone, I will send you those documents with relation to a second study sheet, kind of summarize it. This was a very compact book with, like I would call it, reference information. So it's pretty much like a guidebook when you are building different components for your program. Pretty much everyone here would be, I guess, providing input for their organization with regard to developing a program. Because when it's ad hoc, you're not able to realize a lot of the benefits. And when I say ad hoc, it only comes up when something happens, you know. And if you're not doing it consistently, you won't realize the benefits of the program. Program needs resources. The program needs your senior management support in order to come to life, in order to become a vital part of the organizational function. So it's there, it's important, pretty much under operational activities. So I don't think pretty much you're gonna see a decrease in the need for the skill, because working in an electronic environment demands the same type of operating procedures that you would have been using. It's just that the benefits itself requires a bit more in terms of being able to actually implement it in the new environment. A lot of us are still getting used to the electronic environment. So that can be a bit scary, knowing where to file, knowing if things are secure, you know, knowing what questions you should be asking when people are bringing in new technology into your work environment. You know, if there are certain things that are required and stipulated when new legislations impacting your institution come into play, what is there to or who is there to take responsibility and ensure their processes, the procedures, the policies are implemented, and there's a full monitoring and reporting of what's happening. Okay, so if there are no further questions, actually the policy I wanted to share with you guys, I should be able to just send that because policy is important, and to understand what would need to be in a records management policy helps to drive knowing the tools, etc., that you will need to make it an effective program. So the one that I'm going to send, it was for, I can't remember the institution, but I think it was very well laid out. The policy consisted of an intent. The intent said, the intent of this policy is to outline the principles, approach, and rules associated with records management to ensure that employees and any other representatives understand their record keeping roles and responsibilities, and to outline commitment to effective, efficient, and compliant records management practices. Okay, so that's very simple, and that's the thing with policies. You want something that's very clear and easy to understand. So this one, the intent, I really like the way they simplified it to 3 points, and you have to have a scope. And this one mentioned that the scope of the policy, it applied to all aspects of the business, governance, and administrative services. Okay, it covered records in all formats, and that's what we said. Records management isn't only for the paper or for the electronic. If you have audio records, if you have video records, if you have photographs, and they are company records, they need to be managed. Okay, so the scope covers your businesses and governance and corporate administrative services. It covers your records in all formats: paper, hard copy, digitized, etc. Email records as well, records and databases. If you have microfilm, if you have other types of technology that you use and that result in records being created, the records management, the policy itself should cover that. Okay. And so the policy itself is one of the components of the framework for records management. And remember, I said records management falls under the umbrella of governance. Okay, so it's governance, and underneath governance, you have records management as that subcomponent. Okay, so when you talk about the scope, you want to define stuff that relates to records management. So people understand what is a file plan, what is a retention schedule, what is disposition, your policy, and you don't have to actually put that in the policy. What you can do is you can have that like as an attachment. You can have a records management glossary, so that provides familiarity with the terms for the persons reading the policy. Okay, remember you have to define what is a record in your policy as well. Okay, and then you can go on to your policy procedures, and that would come in the form of a statement. Okay, so this particular sample said that the bank recognizes the records play an important role in supporting, and so this statement refers to those particular things that we would have also looked at as benefits: supporting good business practices that align to the strategic direction, supporting service delivery, business continuity, remember we talked about that, and corporate governance. It also talks about providing evidence. It talks about compliance. It talks about The fact that the corporate memory is important. So those historical records that told when you first came into existence, that talked about milestones in the company as it relates to employees, as it relates to maybe growth for persons that work in profit-driven organizations, certain milestones that the company wishes to remember. Those type of things are part of making that statement. Okay, you have your principles. Okay, what are the policy principles? So this particular sample talked about records management being systematic and comprehensive. Okay, so that's one of the things that we were also talking about with regard to records not being ad hoc. So they must be made to reflect all records and all activities, transactions, decisions, etc. Okay, the fact that you should have standardized processes in place, that ownership of the records is known to be the institution. So first and foremost off the bat, persons know that the records you create, they're not yours. They are the institutions, and so follow institutional guidelines with regard to their care and handling. And the fact that it's everyone's responsibility, okay? Everyone's responsibility to ensure records are properly managed. The records, they must be accurate, okay? And you must be able to have them managed so that they are reliable and secure. Your records should be retained only for as long as they are required, okay? And then disposed of in a planned way with authorization. Okay, and how are you gonna approach, or what is the approach for taking these actions? So that would be outlined as well. I think the shortest policy I saw was something for Bank of England. If you Google the Bank of England records management policy, they that was like the most concise. And when it's done like that, what it is that you put into place those core things about the policy in terms of the responsibilities and roles, etc. And then you have your documentation in terms of your policies or your procedures for the various components. So you don't burden down the policy itself with so much documentation. You have that established as, like I said, additional as appendix, etc. So when we talk about the whole strategy and stuff like that, ongoing management of records through the life cycle, administering and utilizing your systems, continual improvement to your practices and your processes, okay? Making sure you do it in a collaborative way so that you're receiving advice and support, okay? To make sure you're monitoring and reporting. You also want to ensure that the records are in, that you have in other business systems. You also have to ensure that records management support that. When I say other business systems, remember we talked about the structured data. So they have a format, they have fields of information, okay? But they still have to be managed in terms of retention time frames. So you want to make sure that your records management program is able to support that so that those records follow or are in compliance with whatever rules and regulations you have to abide by. Okay, and so that's pretty much it in terms of summarizing this whole experience. So I just want to say thank you all for coming to take a sneak peek into this world of managing records. And I trust it would have provided you with good resources to strengthen and improve your environment. So with that, I just say thanks. It was good to be with you for these few short weeks. And hopefully we'll see where it leads us. I hope you're able to utilize a lot of the tips and techniques in your everyday environment as well. So with that said, any further questions? You can still reach out to me via email. Like I say, if there are still some things you want clarified. And pretty much that's all I have to say for this evening. Everyone clear with regard to where their exam is being hosted and the time, right? I think Miguel would probably send an email reminder.
Yes, I'm clear.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes, ma'am, I'm clear.
Best of luck, and based on the papers that have been turned in, pretty much, I think everyone should do well.
Thank you.
Thank you too. Thank you too. It's a pleasure meeting you guys. Hope I didn't bore you to death. So much talking. Oh dear, I can't do too much longer with this virtual. Oh Lord, it's just test.
Well, so some people learn differently. I read, but when
Uh-huh.
I hear lecturers speak, sometimes it reinforces it. So,
Uh,
I mean, I prefer the classroom setting over this Zoom thing as well, but I guess we're stuck with it for now.
yeah, yeah. So I just thank you guys for the patience and forbearance to deal with us. And sometimes with the little glitches, etc. Sitting here sometimes making sure I gotta have a little backup in case I have to talk on the phone or something because things going down. So hopefully, oh, you know what? I have some little now. I don't know how Freeport's gonna get theirs, but I have a little goodie bag for you guys. So the persons in Nassau, I'll leave theirs at the institute. So when you come to take your exam on Saturday, Freeport, I will have to let Mr. Mr. Pratt get your little goodie bag to you. So you may receive that in a delayed mode.
We appreciate it, Mom.
Yeah, so it's just usually we attend conferences, so we get a lot of insight. We get to a lot of meet a lot of persons involved in the profession. So networking is good. So you tend to find representatives from the various software companies that attend the conferences, and you can speak with them one on one, etc. So last year, that was the last time I traveled. we we went to a conference beginning of March, and by the time as we got home, that next week the place was on lockdown. So I have some little reading materials, some from some vendors describing their products, etc. That I have to just drop in a little goodie bag and give you guys to hopefully, like I say, it's just resources and links that who knows if you need additional assistance, you can probably reach out to some of them. I think I had some flyers. I think with this document restoration and disaster or whatever. So I'll put that in the bag for Freeport. Yeah.
We wouldn't want that, but I know we
It's about it's just flyers. You know, some companies you have a way who offer certain services.
yeah, no, I'm saying we appreciate it from you, but we don't want the disasters that, you know.
No, no, I don't want that either. I'm thinking about it in terms of your continuity.
Yes, yes. But
So
yeah,
yeah.
Mr. Tucker, you kind of, at least our boss usually pushes it, but you kind of you didn't bore us. The
Mm-hmm.
material record keeping, the topic behind it could be boring, but because I guess all of us on in the class, we work at organizations where the records are so important. You kind of brought it to light to be custodians, you know, to be actually protectors of the documents now. So that's what I kind of got from it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I say, at this level, I really didn't want to make it so intense because it's at this level, you just need to get the concepts in. You need to understand what it is and what it entails. Okay, and then depending on the area of interest, then you can delve deeper. You know, so like for somebody who has no program in place, you want to have an idea of what a program consists of.
Yes.
Okay, and then you want to know how do you implement it. You know, you want to know the things that will help you with the program. So that will be like your tools. Okay, so pretty much whatever attachments I send, I don't want to distract from the exam. So you can you can read it at your leisure, but definitely no one here has a policy, right? So definitely the policy document, that's a good template that you can work on to create something for your company. So basically going away from this session, um, you're just taking one step at a time. So if you don't have anything in place with regard for a program, find a sponsor, find a senior person. If like, well, Freeport, we already know their senior management on board. So you would take it now to the level of building your frameworks and building your frameworks. You're small, and so a lot of things you may not need to have to form a committee to do, etc. So look at starting to develop your policy, okay, and then fleshing out the procedures that would go around it, okay, and also you can then do your inventory, and based on your inventory, you can then work on developing your file plan and retention. Okay, and you know those two areas they come with some more research because basically your retention, you're going to look at your business needs and any legal requirements. Okay, so anything in terms of law that impacts your records, you'd want to make sure that's a part of why you determine the time frame to keep those records. Okay, and then when you get to the point where you think you may need assistance with a system, okay, because usually once you get you have that volume associated with records management, you manual is not the way to go because you basically won't be able to have timely feedback, and so you have to look at a solution to help you manage them, and pretty much you're on your way. So Miss Moss, when I hear from you again, where are you going to be? What
Well,
level?
we have a document in place. I've seen it before, but like
Okay.
now I'll have to like get it from management and like go through it to
Mm-hmm.
see exactly, you know,
Yeah,
what we can
because
do. Yeah, because I have never seen it, or I can't say, well, okay, we are following it as
mm-hmm,
is.
mm-hmm,
So that will be the first thing for me to access that document and
right.
then go through it
See,
to
because
see if
you have something, you're not starting from scratch.
right.
So
But
your
then I
point,
don't know
right,
exactly how they created it and if it's
right.
based around the details that we learned in this class. So
And then you would want to, if those type documents, they are what we call living documents. So even in your policy, you need to establish a review time.
okay.
You have to put the some hooks in there that will ensure that it doesn't go, like I say, to something done ad hoc in an ad hoc manner.
Okay.
Right. So like now you picking up this document, you looking at it, you see whether what needs to be updated or added
Mm-hmm.
in there. And
Mm-hmm.
then that's basically how you would, once you get the sign off, I don't know how your policies go to your senior management and then your board, or how, that whole process of becoming a policy,
Yes. Okay.
be probably the revision. For you, it would be a revision of the policy.
I understand.
Yeah. And Miss Blair, you have documents, right?
Yes, we do.
Oh, cool. So you basically only have to keep them on their toes. You have to, based on the information presented. And like I say, this template that I'm going to share for the policy, if some things are in there that you feel are beneficial to getting more support and traction and making sure your policy is doable, then that you would also be like Miss Moss doing a update on recommendation. So
Yeah.
even if it turn in terms of migration, there with systems. So what about, and something I don't know, I may have mentioned briefly, but something that's on the horizon is the cloud. Okay. So basically, it may not be that you're storing them on your networks, etc., but you're actually working from the cloud, depending on your risk tolerance and based on your inventory, the types of records that you find are conducive to storage in the cloud, then that has to be managed. So the it just changes, based on the platform. We've gone from paper, we're in electronic, and in electronic, rather than the hard drives, etc., network drives, etc., there's now the option of cloud storage. So what are the benefits and what are the negative, I guess, views that persons have? And the biggest thing with cloud is privacy and also proprietary information. You want to know that what's going to happen when you no longer want to be a part of that. Is it easy to get out of? But futuristically, the cloud is on the horizon. The cloud in terms of a lot of persons, if they're doing hosting, or if they're being hosted in a cloud environment, there's a cost factor there in that it cuts out having to have a lot of stuff on premise. If all your applications, etc., you're being facilitated via a cloud vendor. So it doesn't end, it just continues. So everyone be safe, and thanks. I guess I will have or I will be in contact with you guys after the exam. And in the meantime, I'll just send, like I say, some good support and reference materials that can be utilized. So good night, all.
Okay, good night.
Take care.
Good night. Thank you so much, Ms. Tucker. Good night.
No problem. Bye. I
Good.
never went to Freeport, but now I know two people.
Oh yeah, man.
Not that you're the only one. I know in Freeport, the only time I literally they used to have some flights that would you would connect you would transit from Freeport to like Jersey, Atlantic City. That was a while.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so I never really got outside the airport.
Oh jeez. No, you have to come on. It's like a
Yeah,
chill
I
version of Nassau.
yeah. And
Yeah.
we had an office down there, but it's closed now with all this stuff. Pretty much the Freeport office for exchange control. They had an office down there in Freeport. So I knew a lot of the staff down there, but right now with all of this, we just doing things virtually. So
Yeah.
yeah. But I have intentions to make it a reality. Y'all
Awesome.
on my bucket list.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great.
Take care. Good night, guys.
Okay, good
Good
night.
night.
Right.
Okay.